I'm going to call to order a meeting of the North Andover School Committee, February 26, 2015, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a quick reminder that our meeting is being recorded, and I would ask that you silence your cell phones accordingly. So we will begin with public comment for agenda items only.
Hi everyone, my name is Marnie K. Perry and my address is 25 Poor Street. I'm here to discuss a item on the agenda that I'm hoping you consider putting a particular policy in place regarding siblings and their siblings who are on a special education, in a special education program in one of the elementary schools. Right now I have a first grader at the Franklin School in the PDD program and a daughter in kindergarten at the Thompson School. I was hoping that they would go to the same building because a policy like this would be in place. However, it didn't work out that way. So I'm hoping you guys will consider putting a policy in place. There are 5 elementary schools, and 4 out of the 5, as you know, have different programs in them. So I feel like you're going to run into this, maybe not very frequently, but frequently enough where it should hopefully be a non-issue for parents. Obviously, logistically, drop off and pickup has been difficult. I pick up my oldest 15 minutes early to get to my youngest, and between the events in both elementary schools, there is a lot going on. And I think if you have a child in any one of those 4 programs, you probably have a lot going on anyway. So to add this to your plate is not that great. So I'm just hoping you guys consider voting that in and making it an official policy. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
All right. There's no recognition tonight, so we will move right to the student report. Nicole?
Hi, thank you for allowing me to talk. I'm going to start off with the National Honor Society. They're having their induction on March 2nd. It's to give recognition to the people who got into the National Honor Society this year, and I'm going to be one of those students who are going to be able to walk across the stage. And I'm very excited about it because I worked really hard for it, and it's just really nice that it paid off. On March 6th, there's going to be a freshman-sophomore semi-formal. So this is a way for the sophomore class to raise money for their class so they can have events in the future. So it'll be an interesting event because I'm pretty sure it's going to be a black and white theme. I'm not really sure. There's some rumors around I'm not really 100% sure. On March 9th, there's going to be an 8th grade transition night. So students in the 8th grade can come to the high school and learn where everything is and just ask questions and stuff. March 9th. Yeah. I'm not really sure when I'm going to be here next because I'm not really 100% when every meeting is, but on March 18th there's going to be a chorus concert. I'm pretty sure they have one every trimester, so that's when it's going to be for this trimester. And on March 20th, Mr. North Andover is going to happen. I know some of the students who are going to be in the show, and they're already preparing for it, so it's going to be interesting. Everyone's doing videos and cool acts and stuff, so it's always an interesting event to go to. And the girls basketball team and boys basketball team, they're actually competing in the state tourney. I'm pretty sure the boys are playing today in Beverly tonight at 7 o'clock, and some track members actually made the all-state competition, and I'm pretty sure that happened over vacation, if not this past week, but I just know about it because some of the girls were leaving school early for it, and the gymnastics team made it to sectionals, but they did not move on to states this year.
So do you want to talk about what you've done in gymnastics?
Well, I'm the state champ on the beam this year, which is really nice. Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well.
And I made it to the national championships in Florida, so I'll be competing in May.
Nice. Excellent.
And you're the only one from the team who made it.
Yeah, sadly.
Well, it's a great honor. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it for today.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will now move on to consent agenda, approval of regular session minutes, which are in the packet, and it is for January 22nd and the 29th.
You want to take them both together or individually?
I can accept any motion that comes forward, I guess.
So, Mr. Chair, I move to approve the minutes as presented in the packet for January 22 and January 29, 2015.
Second?
All in favor of, any discussion, I'm sorry.
I think we're good.
Mrs. Warren?
Nope, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm all set, thank you.
All right, so all in favor of approving the minutes for January 22nd and 29th as presented in the warrant, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we are approved 4-0 with one absent. Our next, sorry, I lost my page there, is the executive session minutes with some redactions as noted, and these were forwarded yesterday, I believe.
So, Mr. Chair, move to approve the release of redacted notes as distributed today for executive session minutes, dates pursuant to the distribution list.
Okay.
Second?
Any discussion? All right. All in favor of approving the executive minute notes as presented?
Aye.
Aye.
And thank you for good clerkship in reporting.
I would say that I would reserve for him, for Mr. Teresi, the right to review those, and maybe at our next meeting, if he has some comments, because he had some specific issues that he wanted to make sure were in those
Okay.
minutes, and they may or may not reflect what his take on some of the specifics may be. So we might just reserve for him the right to provide some other comment on at least one of those sets of minutes.
Okay.
I would just say that.
All right, I'll send him a note and ask him to,
If there's anything to let you know before the
Right.
next meeting.
all right. All right, so Chair's report. I will be relatively short and sweet. We're obviously back to school, which I think this is our first 5-day week. Mr. Gillen, again, I think you're saying in 6 weeks that we've had?
I was saying this is the 14th day of school out of the approximately last 34 days counting weekends.
Right.
So we're doing some mental math and some of the classroom visits yet today.
Trying to figure out what that trend is. So
Percentages.
It's, I know, at least in my house, it's a little crazy going back after vacation, but having a 5-day week is certainly great on the parents, I'm sure. There was, I don't know if you guys participated in it, but there was a number of kind of emails and communication on the Massachusetts School Committee listserv over the past couple of weeks regarding school vacations. There was actually a survey that was distributed. The results are not final. I think there's a conference that they're waiting for some of the superintendents to come back from, and then they will release those notes and kind of bring them forward. So just for the public, the survey and the communication was really about when do we start school? Do we start school kind of before Labor Day, after Labor Day? Where are we in terms of vacations? And there was I got a copy of the unofficial survey results, and there's really kind of all over the place in terms of when school districts start. It varied a little bit, it seemed, from eastern Massachusetts to a little on the west. But there was a growing kind of trend, or theme that was out there, I should say, of wanting to kind of almost have a state calendar, if you will. So everybody kind of did the same thing. I think we always kind of hear of neighboring towns who start a week or so earlier, and they're getting out earlier, and kind of just making that a little more standard within the state. One of the things that's really come up as well, and we heard this I guess 2-3 years ago with our individual surveys that we did in North Andover is whether or not we wanted to get rid of the April and February vacations and look to a consolidated March. It really only buys us about 3 days worth of school days in terms of the calendar, but I wouldn't say it's overwhelmingly, but about 55% of the towns that had responded to the survey are in favor of that. So I don't know if that would be a trend that we would see. My gut is that if we did anything, we would probably be doing it together as a entire almost state moving forward, and I would anticipate that would not happen for at least a year to 2 years, if it happened at all.
Over the last several weeks, I have been, I don't know, surprised to see editorials in both the Boston Globe and in the Eagle Tribune saying, you know, consolidating those 2 weeks might make sense. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting set of groups weighing in on the matter.
Yep.
Now, one of the things that we've said, and I think others had said this on the listserv, was one of the problems by consolidation, I'm assuming that we would, that the single vacation would be like spring break that colleges take, whenever that is.
Correct.
And then there was like the impact on MCAS. Has anybody, Dr. Hutchinson, are you aware of anyone approaching the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and talking about readjusting that schedule if we
They'd have to. They're well aware of that.
Okay.
Would
Okay, because that would be, I mean, there would have to be a larger discussion
aware of
than if you were going to have that 1 week vacation, you'd have to adjust the MCAS schedule.
Right, absolutely, or parks. And I did I had a great conversation with Andy from the Andover School Committee. We were looking at, you know, if we were to do anything, obviously we kind of couldn't do anything in a silo. We've got some neighboring towns and communities, and we were looking to kind of just pull that together and really kind of look at the Merrimack Valley and host that and maybe just have a forum of school committee representatives, whether it's a chair or vice chair or just somebody at large. And as we were talking about doing that, I think like the next day, Glenn Kuchar from the School Committee Association came out with a survey. So we're going to wait until that kind of comes back, and then we'll at least have some data to move forward with. So I don't think we're moving anywhere with that yet,
Right.
but I wouldn't be surprised to see more conversation start happening in the next.
This is the broadest conversation I've ever seen on this issue. How about Dr. Hutchinson? I haven't paid attention my whole
Well,
life. Have we ever discussed this?
excuse my skepticism, but it's predictable when you have so much snow and so many days off. That's what rises it up. It's always there, the discussion, but when people are up against, oh my goodness, we're going to school until June 30th, this will always come up in those situations. And then it dies out when we have a no-snow year. So I think it's always worth the conversation. I'd rather push it to year-round school personally, but with totally different types of vacations, but we know how well that would go. But it's just, you know, it's naturally reactive when people have missed so much school that they think that's the solution, and I'm just always skeptical about if we'll actually go anywhere.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we're slated right now for June 23rd.
You're taking away my entire
Sorry.
report.
I read your notes, we're over.
Yes, we're slated now
That's
for
why I'm
June
before you now.
June 23rd. Yeah.
Okay, so there's still a pretty good buffer.
We got 5-day cushion still.
And
Us,
if
we do.
Right.
Yeah,
But lots
not
don't.
every place does.
I just read in the paper that Pentucket is already thinking about going to school some Saturdays.
Because they canceled it.
Yeah, they canceled weeks, right, so. I mean,
Yeah.
One of the things to point out, Hutch, which a lot of people don't realize is by having the PD days early was just as good as having the kids in rather than have those spread out through the course of the year. Because those would be days where, you know, the first one's always going to be teachers, but when you get the next two with teachers, whether it's kids or teachers, those PD days are typically in the 185-day plan, and you'd have them off in different periods through the year. So putting those up front was a big help, along with the other holidays eliminated.
So that helped.
So maybe this is more for your report, but I guess with the amount of time off of school, do we think that we have any concerns with preparedness for evaluations, or is that also, all right, let me hold that until
You might want to hold that.
we get through the,
Otherwise, Hutch is just going to have nothing.
all right. Sincere apologies.
I didn't prep him, sorry.
Yeah.
So we can move on to the superintendent's report then. Oh, sorry.
Can I just say, I'd like to just give a 30-second report on the playgrounds.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot about that.
Well, last week or this week?
Last one.
Last week. Last week, the town manager held a meeting to present a report that was done by a consultant, which was an assessment of all the playgrounds in North Andover, public and public school and the municipal playgrounds. And the consultant had used some accepted criteria for ranking the playgrounds in the order of importance of which needed to be worked on first. And the list had at the top Franklin, Kittredge, and Drummond playgrounds were at the top of the list. Attending the meeting were a number of PTO presidents and co-presidents and vice presidents. He let them make the decision on the priority on those three items. And they prioritized them: Franklin, Kittredge, Drummond. So this year, Franklin will have a submission to the CPC for monies to work on their playground, along with some matching funds from the town, and then Kittredge next year, and then Drummond. So I was very impressed with how well they had done. It's a great effort. If you look on the town website, the presentation is there electronically, and you can take a look at the presentation. And they're also going to be finalizing the report and releasing that, so we can all take a look at that. But I thought it was just a wonderful effort, and it really kind of now, in my mind, sort of puts that all to bed. We have a plan. We know what we're doing. He's made a commitment to support the plan, not only with some upfront money by playground when they're refurbishing, but also money for sustainment to keep all the playgrounds repaired and going. So it's a great plan. I think that's just, it couldn't have turned out better, and I was very impressed with him and what the town side, the municipal side had done on all that. Mr. Santilli, Ms. Burzlaff et al. Had really done a great job there. So I feel really good about that effort, and I think we're in good shape. And they were very respectful about how we all were. It was a one town. Part of his one town philosophy. So anyway.
And that will still need to be voted on at town meeting in terms of CPA funds.
Correct.
And then
Yeah.
the
But I mean,
overall town budget.
what he said in this meeting was, he said, here's the plan. You can either, sort of get on board with the plan, or do your own thing, whatever you want to do. If you support the plan, then I will support the plan, right? And there's monies in it from the town and maintenance and all of that. If you don't support the plan, you want to go your own way, that's fine, but I won't independently support the plan. So either we're all together on this, or we're all going to go our separate ways. And, the consensus was to support the plan. So it's great. It's a wonderful solution.
Great. All right. Thank you, Mr. Limper.
There are a few things left, yes.
You got anything left?
Just emphasize that what we are doing is keeping track on our website right underneath where the calendar is, letting people know as of today, the last day of school is June 23rd. We hope, although it's subject to change, we really do hope we don't miss any more school. Connected to that, the DESE last Thursday sent us notification that they are extending the spring testing period roughly by a week. And that applies to grades 3 through 8. So what happens in that testing, in those testing times, is every school principal simply arranges, although they might have three weeks of testing, it doesn't mean kids are in the same grade or testing every day. I mean, kids might just have 1 or 2 tests, but it has to be spread out and distributed across grades 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, and 8. So they've extended it essentially 1 week for grades 3 through 8, so the principals now have a little more leeway and flexibility. Typically, it's maybe a little tight, but now they're going to have a little more time to do that. They also provided an option for alternate administration, and they said we had to give them the answer by today, 5 o'clock. We talked about this at leadership team with the principals, and we agreed that we wanted to opt for the additional time, which simply means we've now chosen different dates, alternate dates, which gave maybe a week longer. There were a number of teachers that reported they were just feeling stressed because they haven't felt like they've establish any continuity.
Not much
And so
momentum.
therefore, and it's like, it's not a big deal. We just chosen to take the alternate dates. Those only apply to the grades 4, 7, and 10 composition. And mostly it has an impact on the high school. The high school sciences, the high school math, 10th grade math, and also the 10th grade ELA composition, which is a series of 3 or 4 tests. So, and basically in the high school, what happens in MCAS is the rest of the school operates in 10th grade, for instance, that's the highest test, the grade that's mostly tested. They have a special wing, they keep them in a separate wing and do the testing on those days. They've had to make some shifts in the trimester schedule simply because of the days, which they've always done every year, even if we only miss 2 or 3 days. So that fit better into their adjustment as well. We've had to make some shifts in trimester, and it varies a little bit. Elementary school really doesn't matter too much, but we still are shifting a little bit the reporting date by a week. And in middle school, it has an impact on specialists, on a related arts schedule. So they're making the little shifts, and again, it's within a period of 5 school days that shifts will occur. And principals are, especially middle school and high school, will be those notifications, and we're doing it from the central office for elementary. So all those changes will be communicated. Now, they're shifted to normal school days anyway, so there's no reason why students should be missing or have planned vacations during those days, but, and it's within that week, all right?
And that doesn't, the break of the trimesters in the high school, that's not in jeopardy there, right? I mean, that's...
They're shifting it,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
It's, what's not, well, I don't know what you...
With the trimesters, when does this 3rd trimester begin? Is that going to interfere at all, or is that too early?
No, they're just shifting it.
Okay.
They're just shifting it out, which, and every year they always do. If we miss 2, 3 days, they'll also do a little shift.
Okay.
Depending upon, and this is the time in which it usually occurs, so they'll always make that shift. They'll shift the beginning of the 3rd trimester a little bit.
Okay.
All right. Seniors, they've been really happy that we've missed 6 days. They don't have to make it up. All right. So I know I communicated with the school committee about the Cambridge Institute contract. We did the follow-up. Carla and I and Steve Nugent met with them today to further the process. I tell you what, they came exceptionally prepared with a team full of details. They were a breath of fresh air to work with and to see how they're going to be supporting both the academic side and also the host family side. Currently, they have a link on the town website where we're trying to recruit host families. We will only accept students that are, we discussed this today. All of our students must be hosted in North Andover. We will not accept them if they're hosted outside of North Andover. That's all proceeding very smoothly, and it was a pleasure to meet with them today, and they were very, very well prepared. And part of that follow-up we did was also with more schools who spoke very highly of them. So,
Quick question on the agreement.
Yep.
Will we be successful in changing this to an extension on signature, or is it currently perpetuating agreement?
if we don't take an action, but what Bev has done, has embedded it into the school committee agenda for next year as she makes shifts. So she's put it right in the school committee agenda prior to those dates. So it's,
Okay.
It'll come up for discussion.
yeah, it'll come, absolutely.
Thank you.
Also, I know we have a meeting, Carl and myself, with the president of Northern Essex Community College next week. They reached out to us to become a little more engaged in looking at the possibilities of creating more opportunities for students. We've had these conversations before, and there was some action a few years ago, and Glenn's reaching out again to see how we can connect more.
This would be like student teaching, or what?
No, it's not student teaching. It would be for college credits, college courses, college level courses, that type of thing, all right? And next week, we'll also be reporting out on professional development progress this year, all right? So we'll have a number of teachers here, our coordinators, Mr. Gillian, to begin to present more on that. Since we're out of budget season now, let's get back to the good stuff, so to speak.
Go back to work.
And that's it.
Okay.
Will you be reading out on the status of the discussions with the college credit at some point?
Yep,
Or is
oh,
it-
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the meeting is next Friday, so I won't be able to, well, I'll
Yeah,
follow
like-
through with the discussion.
I'd like to hear where the impediments are to ensuring that we have that as an available,
Yep, yep.
available resource. I think in the past, some challenges have been conflict with existing school schedule, transportation, et
Because
cetera.
our schedule rotates.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Yep,
So I'd be very interested in hearing if we
Yep.
can get through those
Sure.
impediments.
Just a quick follow-up on, with the China exchange.
Mm-hmm.
We initially were talking about 5. I would
Yes.
anticipate that they're starting to recruit, and are they also, when will they kind of
They've already
notify-
started, and based on the conversation we had, they are very impressed with the high school program. They are very impressed with the opportunities that we have for students. They were actually commenting on, especially in Massachusetts, public schools are highly desirable places. And when they look at our facilities, when they look at our area, they're very, very impressed with it. We're also meeting next week with the home, what's that home department? Home security? Homeland Security, all right, who is, who also does some work, it's a contractor for the government to review all the visa requirements, et cetera, because they have to go through the school. And although it's a very lengthy process, they say at times they guaranteed us it's going to be no more than an hour.
Okay.
So it's well on the move.
Yeah. If you can please keep track of what effort is on our part beside, obviously the student work, but,
Yeah.
certification, hosting visits, that type of thing, just so we can
Yep.
make sure that this doesn't become a resource creep.
Excellent.
That'd be helpful.
All right, we will move on to old business, the fiscal year 15 budget status report. Is that Mr. Mealy?
Yep.
Yeah, and I did a little bit of a different format than normal because this is just highlighting kind of the pressures against our budget and ways we might be able to alleviate those. But there have been changes since the last status report. If you hadn't heard, the governor had adjusted the budgets in some places, and one impact it had on us was his reduction of the kindergarten grant, reduced our allocation by $30,000. So what that means is those expenses that we were going to cover through the grant, $30,000 of them, have to be covered through the operating budget. Our out-of-district tuition, if you recall, we had in September increased by $670,000. So that, more than what we had anticipated, has not changed much since then, only by $35,000. So that hasn't changed a lot, but I have that highlighted as the two areas where we're still susceptible to pressure. The out-of-district transportation has really proven to be the toughest part to cover. Average cost per student for an out-of-district placement is $20,000. So there's $212,000 more than we had anticipated for out-of-district transportation. And the difficult part of that is that it's not eligible for circuit breaker reimbursement. That is something that comes up every year, but nothing has changed. I know there's a proposal going forward now that might have some teeth, but we'll see. The only problem with any of those is you've got a total sum available.
Yeah.
So if they increase that or they allow that,
taking
it comes from somewhere else.
Right. Always happens.
Yep. And then the snow overtime, specialist services, what's happened there is we've been able to impact students going out of district by supplementing or increasing services in district at an additional cost, but not as much as it would cost us if they went out of district. And then the snow overtime, just like you'll see when I get to the municipal side of things, there's an impact to the overtime that we have to provide for snow removal, much more than we normally would have to. So we're at about $1 million in unanticipated expenses. And as I indicated, the other budget pressures include possible additional out-of-district placements. What we do with that number is we look at students that right now are being evaluated to possibly keep in district if we can, but if they do go out of district, if they went out right now, this is what our cost would be for the rest of the year. So the longer that goes on, that number comes down as we move through the year.
And that's in part because they have a 45 days
Exactly.
in terms of the testing. Okay.
Yep. And so how we've been trying to impact that number, we have $175,000 that has been transferred into our budget from the town manager, as he had indicated, as a special education out-of-district contingency. That has happened. We had finished last year with an additional $21,000, which we used to prepay out-of-district expenses. We had $150,000 in that line item, which has been used up, as well as our turnover savings. Anything we had in turnover savings has been used for this purpose. And then we've frozen budgets and have really curtailed spending. And right now, it looks like that will mean about $176,000. Those include school allocations, non-snow-related overtime, as much as we can. We just, award overtime on an emergency basis, and then non-critical expenses. Pretty much what we've told everybody is if it can wait until July, it needs to wait until then.
For revolving account activities, how do we get that into the operating budget?
It's a transfer of expenses.
Okay.
Those are expenses that normally would be covered in the operating budget, and we're budgeted that way. But in these two examples, noon attendance, there's not a lot of flexibility with food services, but one area that there is noon attendance. The time that those noon attendants, they serve two functions. One, they spend time in the cafeteria monitoring the meal, and then they spend time outside at recess monitoring the students. The time that they spend monitoring the meal can be charged to food services. Now, we don't always do that. In order to keep the prices down, we try to keep expenses down on that side as well. So it's kind of a trade-off, but she should have enough available. She's starting to build back up, so that should be available to do this year. And transportation, the revenue, we've had increased ridership, so we could probably charge $40,000 to the revolving account for transportation as well.
Do those need to come before the board for approval?
No, they don't.
It's within the budget.
They're discretionary within the...
Within the budget.
Correct.
All this is within the
So
budget.
does that mean next year we'll be looking at potentially increased meal prices?
No, we wouldn't be doing it. This is this year.
Yep.
And what it just means is that we should have in food services, in any type of enterprise fund, you should have about a 3-month contingency that you could, if you didn't get any more revenue, you could pay 3 months of expenses. That's kind of the bar you want to set.
Right.
So we'll be building towards that with the current prices. Erica does a great job of finding good product at the lowest price. So she keeps her expenses down, and that allows her to keep the prices where they are and still build towards that benchmark.
Is there any sunlight with the days off of school with labor and material costs?
It doesn't, you know what,
impact?
days off, I mean, we'll have them towards the end of the year, but it doesn't help her as much. It's lost revenue
All right, so
as well.
Put to the end of the calendar. I see.
Yeah, so it's a number of days in the year she counts on. Okay, possible relief, that 288,256 would be 138,256 because the town manager had also committed to $150,000 the previous year, but that's now in jeopardy because of the winter we're having. So that's why that is below the line, so to speak, and in our possible relief reductions, because he is committed to us. Hutch and I met with him on Monday to review this, and he reviewed his situation with us.
Which you're about to see.
Yeah, exactly. And he's committed to, if he can do it, he will. So there's that, there's utility savings. I don't know the number yet on what utility savings will be for this year. I've asked Ray Santilli to give me that number.
This is like the ESCO.
Right, the ESCO, and it kicks in during the year. It's not a full year. We've budgeted next year for the full guaranteed amount, which is like $288,000. But this year, the numbers are much lower than that, so I'm just trying to get that number from him, and that will help reduce this. Extraordinary relief, I've submitted to the state that we will be submitting. I'm not sure. As I indicated at the beginning of the year, when we were at $670,000
Right.
over, that was right at that number. Anything over that would put us eligible.
That's the 125, right?
Yeah,
125%?
if you're 125% more than the previous
Than the
year,
prior,
anything
yep.
after that is eligible for that year's relief. So 35,000, it's not a big number, but, we'll put in the paperwork and see what we can get.
Is that 70%?
And it's at a percentage, it's
Yeah.
either 70 or 75,
Okay.
right? Yep.
But would that be this year's dollars or next year's dollars?
That's this year, you get it this year. Every year when we do our closeouts of our appeals, there's some funds that are made available then that hadn't been used. And then where we can, personnel, there's not a lot of flexibility with regards to personnel, but hourly personnel, or maybe if a non-classroom position, somebody left, you might be able to get by without it for a period of time. So we look at all those, there's just not a lot of opportunity. And then regarding the municipal side, this was presented to the Board of Selectmen on Monday night by Andrew Mailer. They budget, and the way he explained it to Hutch and I is that North Andover is probably better off than most towns with regards to how close to a realistic number we budget for snow and ice, and it's gone up since I've been here. I know it's gone up. Yeah, so it's budgeted at $875,000. You can see expenses to date. Now, that includes the most recent storm, which has not been finalized yet, but they're estimating $100,000. So expenses to date of $1.8 million for a deficit of $932. They have a reserve for their snow and ice of $165. So right now, as of today, the municipal deficit is projecting to be $767,000. So
Any relief with the governor's declaration of a
yeah,
federal emergency?
in his presentation, I didn't include it because he said don't include it. He said one of the storms, I think it was the first blizzard,
Right.
became eligible. The governor declared a state of emergency and became eligible possibly for FEMA reimbursement. So they'll put in for it, but he's not too, what's the word I'm looking for?
Confident?
Confident, thank you. Yeah, not a hard word.
Okay.
Wasn't coming, that we would get it. But it's a possibility. And if we did, we would be eligible for, I think it was about $265,000 or so. It was over $200,000.
It's still a third, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is pretty sobering, right? We've got a $750,000 deficit with additional special ed at a district, plus an additional $212K for transportation. We're going to let this float, or do we have anything other than, cutting down discretionary income that we have in mind?
Yeah, we'll continue to work with the town manager about what our options are. I mean, all we can do is what we've been doing, which is deal with it as best you can, and where you can pull to offset expenses, you do it. But we'll continue to work closely with the town manager of how we can resolve this.
But sort of the follow-up to that is, at some point, if nothing changed on this in this view, where would we find $288,000? Question.
That's what we'd have to resolve with the town manager.
$288,000 question.
Yep.
So one quick question that I have is, I know our lease at 1600 Osgood is up, but is there possibility of, I mean, the new central office is looking Like, it's moving along. I mean, if we were to end that lease any earlier, is there opportunity? Not that it's, you know, $100,000 or anything, but, you know, a month or two can get us
It's a real good
20,000.
question, because that opportunity seems like it would be there. I can tell you that in dealing with the property owner, while it's been a good deal for us, regarding terms like that, they are adamant about sticking to
Okay.
the contract.
And the lease is up in July?
End of July.
End of July.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Because what I was just thinking, I mean, obviously, there's double utilities that we're going to be paying there as well to support 2 offices.
Not so much.
Um,
Turn the lights off, turn the heat off when we leave Osgood. right?
And that'll be, the Main Street will be minimal. Yeah, and we reduce if we do a
Soon as
full
we walk out
move,
the
once
door,
we're
we
fully
turn it
moved
off.
out, we're not paying, we're not using
Right.
anything there.
Okay.
Yep.
The new office, we have windows that open up, so we will not turn on the air conditioning.
Until you absolutely have to, right?
Yeah, and I assume there's been no fuel credit that we can get to our transportation budget with the bus department? with the
That,
buses?
we do that, and there's a small amount there. That's helping the revolving account. You know what? It's funny because you have that clause in there, and you're a little nervous about it. We put it in there because it reduced the cost of the contract.
Right.
Instead of them building in case something happens, they don't have to.
Right.
And in all honesty, I thought the impact was going to be greater
Yeah.
than it is. And it kind of eases my mind in having that clause in there when prices go up, because they've gone down quite a bit. And the amount of money is, you know, like $1,500 a month.
Right.
So all I'm saying is, on the opposite end, even if they went up a lot, it wouldn't have a great impact on our overall cost.
So, I hate to be the prognosticator of bad news, but if this happens, right, 288 plus the 65K, what's our plan? Should we be working out a few scenarios of how we would do incremental reduction of services to accommodate the budget deficit?
Yeah, those are the discussions we have. It's just, when you say incremental reduction of services, I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Right.
And
how do we get to that list?
Right.
Yeah, and that's our continued discussions with the town manager.
That's fair, but I mean, I don't think, he's been great, he's been supportive, but he can't make, money come out of snow, unfortunately. And I know last time we had a deficit in this order of magnitude, we were very surprised at what we were faced with as the reduction of services. I'm just wondering if we can start
That was,
socializing.
but when we were faced with that, it was more about reduction of services for the following year.
Yeah.
We knew the impact
There was more
going to be on the
flexibility.
next year.
Okay.
Right now, we had this discussion the other day. If you lay off people, that reduces your budget, but then the town picks it up through unemployment. So you're not saving anything.
Doesn't help.
And what it does is really highlights the importance of the warrant article that the town manager is proposing regarding the stabilization fund.
Yeah.
Because when you say order of magnitude, since I've been here, I haven't seen this order of magnitude. We've had to deal with
Yeah, a couple hundred here.
about half of this, 500 to 600,000 is the most we've seen, and we've been able to just squeak by. But when you hit $1 million, there's just so much you can do.
It's a lot of paper clips and pencils.
It also, though, speaks to your point of, and we're beginning to review certain departments of, okay, so what do we do for next year? How could we run it a little more efficiently in some areas next year in order to build up more of a cushion?
Even this year, I mean, what are the service level agreements that we have that, if everyone cleaned out their inbox from email, can we save, $30,000 in server charges? I mean, what consumptions are we doing that we might be able to find some relief? Because I see the financial reality for the town, which is different than in past cases where, we had an opportunity to have a dialogue about, relief. I don't think we have that dialogue this year, and we're going to have to deal with this whether the governor helps us. And thank you very much for dropping kindergarten.
Yeah, when you think about how much we have in discretionary funds, and the fact that, I'll just highlight it, that right now we're projecting 176,000.
Which is enormous.
Right.
It's huge.
That's continuing to gut the same well we got.
Exactly. And there just aren't any other wells to gut. I mean, we've had the conversation just yesterday with the leadership team. We reviewed this with them and asked them to look at everything and come back, next week
Okay.
when we meet, to whatever ideas similar to what you were
Yeah.
saying. What do you think we could do to further
Yeah.
cut things?
Do we have any discretionary subscriptions we can cancel? I mean,
Exactly.
at this point, come on.
All of that, but not 288 Ks.
Well,
I'm just saying.
I think an important thing, as long as I've been here, so, almost 3 years now, this is identified, this is coming out as early as, it's ever has in the past. And so, we're knowing and understanding exactly what's here. This is the first time that, it's even been presented. I think we saw it a little bit earlier today. So I think all of the questions that you're asking, Mr. Gross, are perfectly, I think we need to kind of look at this as well, and also, give the principals and the leadership team a little bit of an opportunity to come back and say, hey, and I don't know what this number is, but maybe, there's 50,000 that they find somewhere in their budgets where they can, meet us at that level, and then, we can look and say, all right, so if we're not getting anything additional from the town, and there we are, what do we do for the remainder of, whatever, 235 or so?
And I think the saving grace in all of this is our current town manager. I mean, who will try to help if he can. I mean, the last time this happened, when we had to use ARRA funds to keep from going bankrupt, we were on our own. It's like,
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
you deal with it.
Figure it out.
I will tell you, though, that option A for us is to do it ourselves.
It should always be option A, right?
It is,
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. Right,
Yep.
right.
No, I understand that, but, I mean, obviously, this is the first time we're even talking about it. I think we're meeting next week as well, so hopefully at that point, the leadership
There'll be
team
more
will have
information.
come back and possibly identified some opportunities that are there.
I also, I already reached out to all of our legislators for North Andover about the reduction in the kindergarten grant funding and letting them know how disruptive it is to have to try to find money in the current budget where the money's already budgeted for different programs and services, how disruptive that is to our programming for this year. And also because they're starting to put together their budget priorities for this upcoming year. So I've been in contact with them. Dr. Hutchinson forwarded me some information to give them more specific details as to what's going on, like where the reduction was coming from, so they knew specifically what to discuss. So anyway, so I've gone down that path, so I don't know if that's going to give us any sort of relief this year, but at least it gets them talking about it. And knowing that, I mean, I know it's not technically local aid, but it is,
Yeah, it is, one way or the other. Right.
It's supporting the education program, and so that's obviously a problem. So anyway, I've put it on their radar, and I'm working with them to try to see what we can do. So I'll keep you updated.
Great, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, look forward to
Did you
next
hear
week.
anything back, or?
Yes, I've spoken to 2 of the 3, and then the third, we're just playing phone tag today. So,
Okay.
but I'll make sure we touch base tomorrow.
Good.
And they've all been supportive. So.
Okay. All right, so we want to, I think, try to make sure that we keep this on the agenda for next week as well.
No copy Fridays. Just need 20 $10,000 ideas,
Yeah, that's right. Simple as that. Right.
just like that.
I mean, there's been other districts that have been in situations like this over the years, and they've gone through very extraordinary conditions as far as kind of renegotiating almost forcibly with the union for leaves, and it's never a pretty picture. And, we've never been forced to go there, nor is the town manager even suggesting something like that. But I think the more, as we work with him, and he's a wonderful person to work with, we identify what's reality. And I think we all know that we're working pretty tight, and that this winter is catastrophe.
In your discussion with him, did he give you any indication about what his plan was to cover the snow and ice?
They're still
overrun?
working through it, too. I mean, they still don't know the total impact.
Okay.
It's still a running meter.
So
Yep.
he didn't offer any suggestion about what their plan was?
And unfortunately, we have another solid month of winter.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. We're not
Did-
done yet.
Did we have turnover
March
savings
Madness.
earmarked for anything this year that we might want to think through? Any stipends or any?
When you say this year or next year?
This year.
This year for next year.
We don't budget
Right,
turnover savings.
but we have everything earmarked.
We don't earmark it either.
No.
All right, it just
No.
rolls to the bottom line.
It does, and
All right.
for this reason.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
That is our contingency fund, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Dr. Hutchinson?
We're moving to mid-cycle of superintendent's goals, right? The purpose of this is simply to offer you my reflections, which I've done in written form, similar to last year. Just reviewing the cycle. The cycle calls for the self-assessment back prior to doing my goals, and then at this point in time, implementing the plan. And the mid-cycle review looks like that wonderful cycle up there that we're halfway through. And the purpose of tonight, and I know you've had short notice, but we can go more detailed next week, right? It's simply to say, okay, when you look at this and you've had time to reflect on it for next week, are there areas you think I need to focus on more and make adjustments? What I've done this year is added a few samples. I haven't done that in the past. Typically, the samples are all at the end. I added a few in just to add some concrete examples, both regarding the professional practice goal, which is about building that collective capacity with the leadership team, and then continued to say, how do you build it now to impact instruction and assessment regarding student goals. Part of this reflection is areas that I think are going pretty strongly. As far as an example, the planning for success model, where I've showed you 2 examples, or maybe 3 examples in the attachments. One is connected to the work of our strategic plan, and so, for instance, next week you'll see some samples of the professional development impact. What we've also done, and the person we worked with, a consultant we worked with from the state, was really intrigued with this, is we took the initiatives in the budget for next year, and we began to write them as action items as well, connected to the strategic plan. So you're going to see some samples of that. We worked further with her. It was our last session today. And she was, in her closing, she said, this is really amazing work as far as compared to how they're progressing across the state on this type of plan. So we felt we've much more comfortable with the model, et cetera. The other piece I've included in the packet is a chart, data chart of how we've rated ourselves as a leadership team over the last, different periods of time over the last 3 years. And so that we began the discussion of that just the other day, as far as where do we think we really want to move and impact. Coincidentally, that came up this afternoon when we were doing work on the strategic plan, to see how we can, areas of, that we thought very strongly and connected to the rubric that's also in there, as well as if we were to look at the area of decision-making, tracking, and follow-through, how that might impact three of the areas and move us more strong. We've made some changes and moved out of the developing stage to more solidly in the proficient, but how do we now, we begin to show some changes within the distinguished area, so what actions will actually move us consistently more into the distinguished area. And now this is based on this rubric that's projected. It's a rubric that is used within the superintendent's groups, and what we're doing is trying to link specific phrases or sections within those rubrics to action items that we can address. So we then have finished the discussion. We're picking it up at our next meeting. But again, I'm very proud of the work we've been engaged in as a team, and to see how we can basically increase the level of understanding and consistency as well as commitment. So the student learning goals are, that's the chart that's reflected, and You understand, though, because of the numbers that we have on the team, sometimes one person is representing by varied, because the numbers have not been consistent because of the sizes of our team. So, one person could be 6%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you just explain a
Yeah.
little bit about
Sure.
kind of where these all came from? I mean, I'm seeing,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at, purpose and clarity, for example, right?
Yep.
So in the proficient range, I'm seeing, 70%, 58, 100, 90, 79. So
Yeah.
my initial kind of thought, we bell curved on that, but I'm not sure that that's the right place.
It's
we need
not
to be.
really, because of the size of the sample, when you see it going from 90 to 100 or 87 to 100, that's one person. So,
The other part of
Jim?
it is, if you look at proficient for December 13,
Yeah.
at 100%, 0% in distinguished
Yeah.
in that same time period. But what happened for October 14 is 10% actually moved to distinguished. So we still have 100% of that are at least proficient. But
Okay.
10% of that went to distinguished.
Just a quick suggestion, maybe you guys could just, this is a Mr. Gilligan idea. This would be, I think, more easy to see if you did it in the 100% bars with 3 segments, right? You know what I mean? There would be like, 5 bars? And, because everything's 100%, right? So you have developing, proficient, and distinguished all in one bar, and you can see the lines between those moves. This is just a difficult way to see it. And that would be
a good gauge for us, because one of the interesting things, Stan, that we talked about was the, some of the people that aren't at our regular weekly groups, we were trying to tease that out a little bit, like some of the assistant principals and their understanding of.
But it's just a way to present the data that I think
Yeah.
would make it a little easier.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, that's what we see, sort of like the MCAS kind of view, where you see, you're doing well, but you're moving, everything's moving higher, so.
Right.
Just a way to look at that.
And I think that's a great point, but my concern is, what are you making out of the data? Is the 11% that's moving to developing significant? Are these people that are joining the leadership team that need
We had that spirit
insights?
discussion because it comes down to context.
Yeah.
Let's put this in context. When you looked at from October 14 to February 15, we actually had 2 people who said it's developing
Yeah.
instead of proficient. Were those 2 new people who maybe weren't as confident as everybody else in, what is our purpose in,
Yeah.
in clarity? So yeah, we've had to have the discussions about the context of these evaluations.
Yes,
Sure, because we have 6 different members, new members
Right.
this year.
Right.
Although
Right.
anecdotally, for instance, from Irwin, when he was attending one of our first meetings, he says, wow, the transition of the team has been fabulous. It seems seamless. Yet, again, they're not into the context of all these pieces.
Yeah.
So we had the discussion, we're not trying to make too much of it, but are we seeing some trending? And most important to us is more really looking at the rubric in the context of our current work and saying, what would we do differently to get to distinguished?
Yeah.
What would it look like? And that's where we're focusing our next step
Well,
of discussion.
and, as you've educated us to understand, it's as much about the rubric as it is about the chart,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that people are looking at this rubric and saying, how are we doing against these words?
Right.
Well, and that's exactly what we talked about in the most recent meetings, is looking at that distinguished column and pulling out action items from it that we need to address to get there.
Right. So that makes sense. But this is, to Mr. Gross's earlier question, this is all self-assessment, so this data is, we're just plotting self-assessments of how we're doing, how the leadership team is doing.
However, in a standards-based
Yeah, yeah.
world,
Yeah, yeah.
self-assessment is huge.
No, I understand.
And any type of assessment you do with kids,
Yeah.
and you do it
Yep.
regularly in class,
Yep.
kids are typically right on.
Yep.
I would hope to say that we can match at least what kids can do as the adults
The
in
teachers could do what
self-assessment.
the leaders could
And
do what the
and
kids-
again,
the students
sometimes
could
it's,
do,
you stop the conversation and say, that's why we always have norm checkers during our meetings and a debrief of the norm checkers at the end of the meeting, so that we're trying to check ourselves on our honesty, so.
We had a good meeting with it yesterday, using a protocol to run through this, and it's interesting to see the different, perspectives, and some of the new folks bring a little bit different lens, and that's refreshing, too.
Can you help me out just for 1 second? Define norm checker. What does that mean? What does a norm checker do?
You don't have to be named Norm.
Yeah.
A
got
norm
that.
checker is, we've established right away in our first retreat with our team, and we come back to it on a regular basis. What are our norms for operation? So at the beginning of a meeting, we typically ask for 2 volunteers to pay attention to the norms and watch our behavior during the meeting, and bring back some anecdotes.
Okay.
We connect it to the norms.
I get it.
How you think. So where did you see that norm in action or not in action? So that's the responsibility.
When you start the meeting, do you review the norms?
No, the norms are attached to every agenda. Yeah, the norms are embedded within every agenda.
So a few years back, the typical norms would be like any group's norms, turn your cell phone off, those types of things. And I think what we've gotten really good at is with our norms is, staying on each other, keeping each other honest. Challenging, be trustworthy, be engaged, team player, like all those different things. More like higher levels.
Where did we get this leadership rubric?
This is from the superintendent's induction program that they
so
presented. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is this part of year 3, or is there not really a year?
We've been using this.
No. I know that, but
Good.
Thanks. But each year, we have, kind of done newer things as, you move from a year 1 superintendent to a year 2. So is this kind of, was this something that was presented as part of your 3rd year kind of?
No, this rubric was presented as year 1, and we continue to.
Just enhance it. Okay, I didn't know if there was new pieces that were added,
Nope,
and that's
nope.
what I was trying to figure out. Okay.
One year, there's one chart on there. We actually, the first year, we did it hard copy using paper, and people forgot to flip it over and rate one of the categories.
Okay.
By the way, we still struggle as far as norms is keeping our phones off sometimes. But anyway.
You got it. Can I ask a specific
Yep.
question on your action template for the specific PP objective here? This is page 7. Recommendation of an alternative data collection and management system.
Yep.
That's due in May, but we already identified it as not met.
We should have said ongoing.
Okay.
We haven't, it's,
Not met yet.
it hasn't met, at the time we were doing, this is where we still got to tweak these templates. At the time this template was filled in, it wasn't met,
Got
but
it.
it's not due until May.
Got it.
So
Okay.
it's really
So it's not that we've abandoned.
ongoing. It's not that we abandoned it.
It's
We're not
just that
doing
we
that
haven't met
anymore.
it yet. I know. Thank you.
No. So thanks for bringing it up. But, again, some of this reflects, for instance, today we did a couple of protocols on tweaking different groups, because these were all different groups, and this was one of the ones, I put it in before, we did some tweaking of this today, but this was done before that, so.
See, well, we're right on that same page.
Yep.
One suggestion about the way you fill out this form, a couple of items right above that. It says collaborative data meetings, document comment assessment review. The date, it's an ongoing activity,
Yep.
status ongoing. It might be helpful for you to just sort of give us a kind of a relative count of how many discrete activities have taken place, if there are such things. Like if there were meetings that were held, how many meetings were held from whenever you started this to now, to when you're reporting?
Yep.
So, because ongoing has that kind of nagging ambiguity that's like, is that 1? Is it 1,000?
Right.
It'd be helpful. I think you'd be giving yourself more credit than you're getting by saying
Yeah.
it's ongoing. You know
Some,
what I mean?
that's a good point. As far as, some of these process benchmarks then are connected by early evidence benchmarks.
Right,
For
right,
instance,
right.
that is, that's where we try to get some numbers in.
Yes, yes.
And we were tweaking that. By the way, we're also trying to tweak adding another column for other items, but I think it's an advancement as far as
No,
our
no,
practice is
absolutely.
concerned.
No, this is great.
And again, every time we meet, we hear more suggestions, so those are good suggestions. So.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, the other pieces you have, I mean, is some of the work we've been doing around rigor and critical thinking and assessments. So one of the protocols that is in there, examining critical thinking and assessments protocol, which is projected now. This is a protocol based on what's called a collaborative assessment conference protocol. It's one of the first protocols, if you do any protocol training as far as looking at student work, it's really, it seems so basic, where you simply ask yourself, what do you see? And when actually, people struggle at just simply saying what they see, because they want to pass judgment, typically. And so it's a good protocol, the collaborative assessment conference, when you're training people in how to look at student work. So that's a basic question. So we modeled this protocol, that protocol, and we used it to create this protocol. And it's been pretty enlightening when you apply it to looking at the assessment in front of you. So we don't have a schedule for next week, but we can show examples of what's been the result of that. We might be able to get this in next week. I have to check with the team. Again, this is part of our strategic plan to focus on certain elements within the teacher's rubric for evaluation, and our focus is, we're applying it not only to assessment in the classroom, but also to the rigor of the classroom, but also to the rigor of assessments. And the interesting thing when you're talking about assessment should drive instruction. So when you look at at your rigor and assessment, if you don't have a high level of rigor and assessment, that may be clearly an indicator that therefore you're not teaching with a high rigor either. Right? There's another tool we'll be using which talks about rigor and relevance in your classroom, and it's a self-assessment. But we've all been doing it as an administrative group, and we've had some really good discussion and feedback regarding this is right on. And we want to be able to build off of that also, and this will move into next year as well. So that's what we've been doing as far as trying to connect.
In this particular protocol, it says resources, critical thinking review rubric. So attached to this, or as part of this process, there would be a rubric.
There's a rubric that goes with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that might be just of interest to us maybe next time to show us what one of those rubrics look like, for this, just, oh, by the way.
So can I ask a higher level process question? So as part of the mid-year evaluation, we kind of trimmed the sails, pardon the nautical analogy, for where the winds were coming from at the beginning of the year. This is also, I think, our opportunity to see if the winds have changed and do we need to retrim. So I'm just wondering, are we going to have the conversation next week about?
That's the focus of the process is, you've been at making suggestions or asking some questions here. The next week's discussion is based on what you've seen here in my reflection. Do you think we have to adjust the jib, is that properly?
Yeah, we could use that. Or the main, or whichever, all of those things, right?
So what might be helpful is just a refresher on, we selected specific elements out of the core area of focus to drill down into these measures. It might be helpful just to reflect on what those were, and I know we had some rating and ranking of what adjacencies we might think were also important.
That's a good idea.
See where we're at.
That's a good idea.
So let's see if we can get that on the agenda.
Do you want me to look?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'd
so
probably dig through the archives to find the last one, but it's all scribbled on.
I'll check Bev with Bev.
Beautiful. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Thank you.
And then what we find, we'll send out there.
Yeah.
So if you think that's not it, we can get some
Great.
response that you get it before.
We can
Okay.
talk about that next week.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Question? Okay. There's nothing we need to vote on this, it's just...
There's no voting at all.
All right.
I just one, I just want to follow up on Mr. Gross's point. In light of doing that, does somehow this $288,000 opportunity we have to succeed here, does somehow that fit into that next discussion? What do we want to, does that in any way influence what we think the priorities ought to be? The fact that we have this other.
Well, I
issue we're
think
trying
that's a
to
good
address.
point. I don't think it necessarily reflects to this, because that's a piece that can very easily connect to the superintendent's evaluation rubric.
Yeah,
Right,
okay.
right.
So if you want to bring that up, that's not built into my goals, et cetera.
Yeah.
All right, that's enough, because although we don't go over the rubric at this point in time, you can bring that up.
Yeah.
And say, I want to see,
But just,
Sure.
I keep reminding myself when we do this every time, this is not it's not an examination, it's an opportunity for us all to succeed.
Sure, yeah.
So we're all trying to
Yeah.
give each other feedback and
Sure.
information,
Yeah.
so we all succeed as a group. So to the extent that we have new things that have come to us,
Sure.
all, how do we fit that into what we're doing here, so
Yeah.
we all get to succeed? And if we
Yeah.
need to adjust both on our side, the school committee side, and on the administration side, this is an opportunity
Yeah.
to have that discussion.
Absolutely.
In terms of priorities that aren't just money, because,
Right.
you know, we often just divorce the money problem as a separate item as though it was, you know, in
Right.
another planet
Yeah.
deal, but it influences all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we might just want to have it be part of that discussion if we're going to
Yeah.
go back and say, okay, we said we were going to look at these things, and how could that affect what we're looking at? I'm just saying. The end, sorry.
Okay.
My rant.
Anything else?
Thanks. No, not to you.
All right, so next we have mid-year review of the school committee goals. So we voted on these, I believe, middle of October of last year. October 2nd. And so really just wanted to bring them back out from the archives, if you will, and just take a look and see kind of where we are with different things. So I mean, my initial thought in terms of community relations, this was probably one of the biggest things that I think happened this year so far, and I think that we really kind of owe a debt of gratitude to Mr. Limpert with the superintendent search process and trying to include the community as much as possible and make that process open and as transparent as there. So from my initial thing that stands out as our biggest win achieved would be right here with community relations. And so I was just going to open with that.
And I think, just to piggyback on that, I think we were very fortunate to have so many community members who volunteered to be a part of the process, and I think that we, the committee certainly benefited from that. We had an incredible pool of very talented and engaged committee members who I think, ultimately provided us with great candidates and just worked well together. So, I mean, we're very fortunate.
Absolutely. This has nothing to do with me. It's all about the group that did this. I mean, this was a group effort, and it was a very successful effort. And, many excellent participants and a lot of good work went into this. So I can't take any special credit for anything that went on here. It was really just a great group of people coming together and really doing a great job. And also being very fortunate that we got some good candidates, And I think, in my mind, I'd like to think that speaks to how well we're doing here in our school district and in our town. I think I would say that, people must have looked at us and said, I might want to work there. That might be a good place to work. And so I think both of those factors were certainly things we ought to be proud of.
So I guess we can say that's met.
Check.
Check. What about the others?
So for strategic planning and financial management, I look at this and I see the transition that we've done in terms of the budget-based. I think I commented earlier, this is the first time, well, I think first of all, Mr. Mealy does a fantastic job of kind of updating us where we are kind of at the end of every month and what the status of all that is. It's really the first time that I've really kind of seen a projection of a problem kind of this early. And, I think we've identified, based upon some exterior forces, kind of what that is. I think we've done some good things in terms of trying to support the district improvement plan and some student achievement there. And I think going through that budget process that was there, the one thing that I think always I struggle with is we always look for a financially responsible budget and what is sound and, what can we get from the town and what can we kind of be reasonable with, but it may not necessarily be educationally everything that we need to have in it. And I think as we look at, some of the special ed funds that are there and the contingencies that are there as well, I think we've taken some good steps with that, but it's really, it's the unknown every year that challenges us.
So I agree, and I think the artifacts that are created when the program-based budgeting exercise is done of what would you do with 3% and what would you do if you didn't have 3%, I think that is something we should be reflecting on when we get into these situations where we do have a deficit on the horizon. And, is that an opportunity to do any course correction based on what we thought we might be able to do, at the last budget cycle? I think that would be taking that planning and turning it into operational benefit that would give that either an exceeded grading or certainly a met grading, that we can use the evidence we've collected as a mechanism to, update our financial trajectory.
That's really, that's an really interesting idea, because if we did the 0, -2, +2, we have -2 on the shelf, right? So if we have to deal with a -2 situation all of a
It may not be
sudden.
relevant anymore, but at least it's something.
But I mean, it's a start.
Yeah.
Yes, you're not starting with a blank piece of paper.
But isn't a lot of that staffing and
Yeah, the
supplies that you buy up
Yeah,
front?
The
I-
complication
really-
with that is that, like last year, where we made a move before hiring positions.
Yeah.
The complication is you might have identified some possibilities, but once you start the year, you're kind of locked in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can't not do a class.
So what, yeah, right,
Yeah,
exactly.
or not offer an
What it
elective.
does suggest is maybe looking at building in some flexibility into your,
Don't look just for resource allocation.
well,
FTE load.
create a system that has some flexibility in it.
Yeah.
Right.
That you can do it as long as things are this way, but if they change, you've got a plan B kind of.
Something in the back.
That you've already thought
Right,
about. Yeah, you've already thought
Yeah.
of plan B.
That would exceed expectations.
What would that be?
I don't know. It's just the
No, I'm just
concept.
curious,
Reuse the wood
yeah. I know, I
in
get
shop,
it, right.
But I think we always struggle with, when we look at the list of priorities that we get from the leadership team and kind of seeing, where that red line is, and you kind of look at the budget, and if there's any contingency that's there, what's right under that budget line is kind of so pressing as well, that there's a temptation to jump for that.
Well, I think you're talking about two different things, right? Because you're talking about managing for contingency for unanticipated costs, but I think you're also talking about what do we want to do that's actually going to maybe push us forward as opposed to just planning for
Right, two
the
different
emergencies.
Well, I see what you're saying. I mean, but I think the problem is, when we're trying to manage for those contingencies, if we're looking to put funds aside for that, then I feel like there's a temptation to utilize that money, to kind of move the programs where we want them to
Well,
go.
that's our current budget that we've voted on for next year, right? I mean, that's what we've done.
That's what
we
we
would try to
that's what we
move
do.
forward, yes, right.
Right.
The one thing that at this point in the fiscal year that always makes me nervous is, so we get this presentation and then we cut 176,000 of allocations, right? That's every principal's discretionary budget. We're just taking their money away. I always wonder, what does that mean? What is the impact of doing that? No copying machines? I mean, what's the real concrete impact to a school when you say all that allocation funds that you thought you had, you don't have it anymore, we took it all back, you have nothing, zero. So if the PTO isn't going to give you a dime, you're screwed. I mean.
Yeah, and it's not just, that's one of the impacts, but the other impact is deferred maintenance. There are items that if it can wait until summertime, then it gets put off until then, and it just kind of builds up our backlog of maintenance items that need to get done.
Yeah, it seems to me it might be helpful for us and for the community to have a little bit of information about what that means. It's like, rather than $176,000, nobody knows what that means. But if you said, here's what's going to happen, well, here's what's the real concrete impact of that. If stuff needs to be fixed, it won't be, right? If people need to paper and pencils, they're not going to have it. If kids bring it from home, or you can't have students, you bring it, or we're not going to have it. Just to sort of bring home what the impacts of this are. And, having good, competent administrators makes it almost look too easy, right? Give it to Jim, he waves his magic wand and he fixes it, right? Yeah. And it's not like that. I mean, it's like, blood from a stone kind of thing. So I think it wouldn't be, inappropriate maybe to have a few examples of what that really means.
I think that'd be useful in the conversation moving forth about, okay, so what's the reality, what budget cuts
Exactly.
are?
When we have, the next
I mean,
update.
we can
Yeah.
So-
put some of that in place.
So based on the information you provided us with the budget update, Jim, is that something that we need to rethink with the budget that we've approved?
For next year, you mean?
Yes.
We had already increased our out-of-district tuition to what we currently have. So again, if the stabilization fund is approved, then we go into next year in
Okay.
very good shape, better shape than we've ever been.
And that includes the
since I've been
additional transportation as well?
here. Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
But we also might consider, and we began to have some of these conversations regarding, well, what might we do to increase more of a cushion? It wouldn't change the amount of money that's been approved, but it would maybe take a look at some positions, that type of thing.
Yep.
When we look, because again, there's certain things as we move along the year that do change. And therefore, how might we become more efficient perhaps as far as the use of personnel is concerned? Therefore, by reducing, and could you therefore reduce some personnel? And I think we should be able to come back and say, we would have more of a cushion next year
Right.
if we did this,
For an example,
based on current information.
an example to me would be hiring full-time employees versus giving a number of employees stipends. Because stipends are completely flexible in some ways, they're not completely flexible, but they're more flexible than hiring somebody, right? So there might be ways to look at how you do work that gives you some flexibility to make changes if you need to make changes, right? Just saying. Again,
We'll be looking at those and
brainstorming.
bringing back conversations.
The only,
I would just hesitate to suggest anything right now because
Yeah.
brainstorming,
Yeah.
you might say something that scares somebody unnecessarily.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, to me, the part that's disheartening is I think we already have large class sizes. I think we already, to me, we're already in the place where I think we don't necessarily want to be. So, the thought of having to now, potentially for next
Yeah,
year,
no.
go even less, I don't know. I think we're heading down a path that is not ideal, to say the least.
And we don't want to become too reactionary.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
the only question I would have, Mr. Mealy, is we had set this as a goal to go from program-based budgeting to performance-based budgeting. And in my opinion, it doesn't seem like we got very far down the performance-based budgeting path yet.
Well, we're still, as a team, working on those
New
initiatives.
That's why the
Okay,
new
okay, so,
initiatives, how would
I
we
mean,
do,
let me
measure
say-
progress in
right,
that area?
Okay, so
I think what
it
we're
hasn't been
missing-
reported
We've done
back.
that.
We're missing the
No,
benchmark.
You may be doing it.
We're missing the benchmarks.
Right,
That's what
because
we're working,
we
that's
haven't
what
set
we're
them.
building now.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. That's the only thing I would say.
Anything new in the budget next year. Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing I would say is with respect to the technology planning goal, I think we did make some progress this year. We helped a little bit, and our new technology director helped a lot, right? So we made a lot of progress, and there are plans in place. I think those plans still need further refinement, but I think we did make progress in that area. So I feel
So within the operations?
correct.
Okay.
Correct. So I think we've made, and certainly we've made dramatic improvements in the actual technology available, right? Infrastructure, internet access, Wi-Fi, all of that. I mean, I think our school district now is in probably about as good shape as most school districts around us. We're doing as well in all of that, ready to go with now student devices or whatever we need, whatever we're going to talk about next. So that, I think that we're,
So right now, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I said, right now, I don't know if there are artifacts to say we've identified those opportunities. I think we heard about a couple of pilots that we may or may not be able to do. I'm not sure if I can say that we've met that yet, and I think we still need to get those artifacts.
progress vertical, right?
Yeah, we think progress is being made.
Correct. I wouldn't say we're done, right?
So that would be something for later in the year to be able to report out what progress was made. I think
Yes.
for me specifically, it's about the opportunities for impacting student learning. That's really most important, because I think that the infrastructure is an ongoing conversation. I think that's well ventilated.
And I think personally, I mean, we looked at what we were going to be purchasing next year, and kind of that lease-to-own option, and just really kind of escalating what that purchase plan was, I think will certainly be a contributing factor to this in a step in the right direction. The one thing that I think we're perhaps making progress on, although I think we'd have to look at some of the supporting information, is, what are the plans and how are we using the curriculum coordinators to incorporate the computers and the technology to best make sure that that is being used in the classroom.
So when Mr. Grant was here, he said they're putting together sort of let's call it a curriculum plan that has addressed the issue that Ms. Warren has raised, which is not technology in the regular curriculum, it's technology curriculum, like what should students be learning about technology at every level. And he said they were working on that, and I would expect him at some point to report back to us about what that looks like. So that is part of that. But there is the larger part, sort of what you're suggesting, is how does technology fit into the rest of the real curriculum, the mainline curriculum. And that is, I think, going to be an ongoing project for some of that.
I'm not saying it's, you start it and there's, a definite end date or anything like that.
Right.
So, perhaps it's kind of up and running and kind of, but, it's making sure that, we're keeping some focus on it.
Well, it'd be nice, from my point of view, it'd be great if our curriculum coordinators and Assistant Superintendent Gilligan came to us and at least gave us kind of a process view of how they're going about doing that, right?
Right.
Here's how we're thinking about trying to take technology and put it into the curriculum, or have it support the curriculum, be integrated with it, with something. Just tell us how you're going about doing that and give us some idea of when you would report back again as how that's going, so not it's done, we know what we're doing, but here's how we're planning on trying to address that.
But I think this is our goal, right? This is, we're to be looking to develop this empowering technology. I'm not sure, I think the readout from our technology director is good, but I think we still lack the vision or the documented plan, which, like other things, we probably need to work on.
Yes, no question.
Mr. Limpert has been a member of that committee.
And I'm waiting to take my lumps when we get the ones that I'm signing up for.
And we are, we have met and discussed the writing of the plan. As a matter of fact, I met with Mr. Grant the other day regarding a basic outline, because we're putting together a small group that is going to simply sit down and write it. Because he has the basic outline
I'm sorry?
of the technology plan.
Here's sort of where we ended up on that technology planning activity. Superintendent Hutchinson put a group together, and the tech director, blah, blah, blah. Everybody sat down and we were going to do the plan, right? Turned out we could do all the facts behind the plan, but we didn't quite get to the plan part, right, which is the why part. So if you're going to spend a ton of money, do a bunch of stuff, why would you do that? Why would somebody give you the money to do that? So we have now suggested an approach to add to what Mr. Grant has already put together, which is a lot of the facts, right? The details, the all the rubrics, the stuff in the back. The why part, which is not long, it's probably pages, not hundreds of pages or dozens of
Too
pages.
long, nobody's going to.
Yeah, so, and that's the current plan, so then that would be the draft that would come back here to the school committee and say, okay, here's now what a draft plan might look like. So there's the upfront part about, why would you do this? Why would anybody give us money to do this? And then if you gave us money, here's what we'd do with it. And we have a lot of the what we'd do with it part. We just don't have the why part written down. So that's the next step in that process.
Okay.
Just saying.
Enrollment?
Enrollment?
Tim's new enrollment.
Jim did it, right?
Yeah, that
new
was
whiz-bang
presented
enrollment.
in January, I'm going to say, as part of the
Yep.
budget.
Yep.
It was. I can tell you the next step. I've been kind of surprised when I started this, not exercise, but effort, that the model that has been created is actually a pretty good one. It only lacks in the ability to predict the kindergarten number. And we're continuing to work on that. But the next step is to have a larger group, the leadership team, review it, maybe come up with a way that we can better predict kindergarten, and then use it to project out for the next few years and determine our facility needs based on those enrollment projections.
Excellent, excellent. And I guess wrapped into that is facility needs. I think we continuously hear and we agree that class size is not optimal.
Right.
Some cases we're busting at the seams. Have we rolled into the Community build-out planning
We have 5 classes slated
in 2018?
in 2017.
Well,
Something like-
I can say it's a chicken or egg kind of question. You've got to complete what you are comfortable with regarding enrollment projections before
Yeah.
you can determine facility needs. So in discussions with the town manager, who is planning kind of the second phase of the facilities master plan, that would be in court, that whatever is determined from these enrollment projections and then facility needs would be wrapped into
Okay.
that plan.
Great. Then there's the elephant in the room.
Governance.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of policies, we have a couple that we have slated for the agenda today, you know, just in general, but we have not really done anything with facility use fees and the insurance policy, insurance or social media policies that are out there.
Yeah. I mean, we did a cursory look.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I get on this so much, but.
How you doing with our
Should be
goals,
the
Jim?
gym.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm cautioning against that happening when we put these together. I can tell you that it won't be long before we're contacting Brian to come together. We've kind of reviewed the existing policies and fee schedules.
Okay.
And we're putting together a group made up of people like Rick Alon from Community Programs, the Fire Department, the Police Department, the Health Department, Food Services, Erica Murphy. And once that group has kind of had its say about some of the suggestions we're making, we'll come forward, review it with Brian, and then bring it to the school committee.
Great.
Okay.
So, not too much longer.
And in my own defense, let me speak to the social media policy topic I've procrastinated on for now a few years. I do think that now that we have the means to really start to use technology in our schools, you know, the infrastructure is there, and we're going to start to have devices, I think this might be a good topic to really start to address maybe as part of our summer retreat. Because I think it's sort of a bigger picture. You've got to get a lot of people in the room to start to think about this, you know, community people, you know, faculty, administrators, you know. So I think that might be the time when we start to say, okay, what group do we want to kind of pull together to start to address this issue so that everybody who is a potential stakeholder might be able to, you know, get
Yeah, and I know there's been some work done canvassing other districts that have interesting approaches to the, you know, these multiple challenges. I think it'd be helpful even if we can just get our hands around that,
Absolutely.
you know, that corpus and just start looking.
And there's a lot of that. You know, and the trend has been recently as the past year or two, you know, the original trend was more restrictive.
Right.
And the most recent trend has been less restrictive because there's no benefit.
It's more
You lock it all
responsibility.
down. If you have it but no longer may use it, what's the point of having it?
Yeah, it's called
So
accountability,
nobody-
right?
Yeah,
You use
but,
it, you own it.
but again, you know, the trend has been, I think, largely in the educational world, to make digital citizenship part of the technology training, really. I mean, technology training should start every year with a refresher on digital citizenship and what that involves, right? Not just keyboarding, not just apps, not just all that, but it should be, here's what that's all about. And it's an opportunity to talk about, you know, it's like a sort of a raise initiative for technology. You know, it's like, let's talk about, you know, what it means to be a good citizen with the use of technology in school and out of school. And we have that opportunity every year, and I think that's way better than any policy we're ever going to write, because, you know, I mean, as soon as you know, it's like hackers. I mean, as soon as you come up with a firewall, they figure out a way around it. So, you know, we're never going to write a policy that's going to keep anything from happening, or we're never going to get anything done. So I think that could be part of that discussion is, you know, how do we make this part of the curriculum? Not just write a policy to address.
I agree, Ms. Lipper, but I think that we have to have a policy that's not in conflict with our current practices.
Absolutely.
We need to have that.
Absolutely. I agree with that
And
completely.
then from there, then we can evolve.
Yeah, but what I'm suggesting is I think that should be, it shouldn't be multiple pages.
Right.
If it's one policy page, that should be about enough if it reflects
I'm with you.
what current practice is.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like 10 or 20 pages of detailed, do this and don't do that, right?
No.
Best plan fits on 2 pages.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, so that's my suggestion.
All
And
right.
how do we rate ourselves on the DIP, District Improvement Plan? Have we met expectations? I know it's an ongoing, it's out
Yeah,
of sync
it's-
with budgeting, but
Right. I don't know if we've looked at anything recently in terms of benchmarks to see that. I don't think we've gotten a solid update to see.
No, so you'll see an example next week, and I think that P says, even in tonight's discussion, so much connected to that, and I think it's continued feedback about the process, about how we do benchmark, like you were having a discussion tonight.
Okay.
To me, I mean, that's how you just continually improve the process. So-
Well, even, I would say even in your mid-cycle review, just the way the data you have and the way you presented it is a fairly noticeable step forward, where accountability, schedule, results are much more clearly shown than they were a couple of years ago. So I think we've definitely seen some progress just in that alone. So, I think we're getting there, And again, what we've talked about, and the next step is to try to link everything, budgets,
Right.
Yep.
improvement plans, blah, blah, blah.
All right, so moving on to second reading of the DECA overnight trip to Orlando, Florida.
So, Mr. Chair, I move to approve the overnight trip to Orlando for DECA conference as presented in the packet.
Second?
Is there a second? Mr. Limpert, any discussion?
The only thing that I want to make sure, I know it's loosely phrased here, but that we do comply with our chaperone to student ratio, because since the number of students is uncertain.
Well, I think what we need to be able to do is give you some updates on how that's progressing when they get the numbers.
Yeah,
so that we
okay.
Yeah,
report
I would
back.
expect we'd be at our
Yep,
8 to 1.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Maybe one final presentation before they actually take the trip.
Yeah, but
Yeah, well, here's the numbers.
exactly.
And here's chaperone.
And I know the need
Sure.
for approval so they can go forward and get the
Yep.
charter information
Absolutely.
and flights and whatnot. And just one other common question, this does not impact the discretionary budget at all, correct? This is self-funded?
Yep.
Thank you, I
Correct.
just wanted to be clear, thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for checking out.
I'm done, thank you.
All right, anything else?
Nope.
All right, all in favor of approving the DECA overnight trip to Orlando, Florida, say aye.
Aye.
No, noes?
Love to go.
Yeah,
Yeah, love to go right now.
No kidding, huh?
Chaperone.
All right, so let's move on to new business. Looking at the time, we are actually almost on time, so that,
Really?
yeah, it's exciting. I'm sorry? All right. So we have the annual report for Crest with the budget information. And so they submit to us usually a year in, 1 year behind? Is that always 1 year?
Yeah, it's like anything, it's the prior year, right?
Okay,
Year in
all right.
review.
It just, all right. So I don't know if there's nothing to vote on for it, it's just presenting it in.
The only thing I would say, just to put this in context for you all, is if you look on page 8 of this report, it shows you the participants in the collaborative and what their share of the activity is. We're kind of down at the smaller end of the scale. We're like 6th or 7th in terms of participation. And for us, that means 10 students and about $500,000. Right? That's what our participation in Crest.
Okay.
These are students, they provide services we can't otherwise provide.
Right.
And so that's what it is. And we also, this is often where students go for evaluation, like the 45
Right.
evals. We have 3 students there right now for evals. But it's 10 and about 530,000 annualized that we're giving to Crest. It's a wonderful, they really, the one thing I would say in my year or so of participation with this is the new management team is excellent. and they're doing a great job. And, I couldn't be happier with this organization and how well it's doing so. I think it's a really good deal, and it's helpful for all these communities who really need this help. Mostly cities, as you can see, but others who do use it a lot, so it's a great program.
Quick question, Ms. Limper, you may not know, but does their revenue trend concern us, or is that a result of the attrition of other communities?
I think that's kind of just a misunderstanding, because I think what it was this represents kind of now making this organization efficient and doing what it's supposed to be doing, right? This is from when it wasn't doing the right thing to doing the right thing. So this is why there is new management, right? So I think that's really what this reflects, because they actually are providing more services than they did 5 years ago. More services for less money, running more efficiently, and they now know where the money's going. Right. That was the reason why they fired everybody before, and the state basically put them into receivership and forced them to get new management, was because they didn't know where all the money was going. So
Similar to what I was talking about earlier regarding our enterprise funds and, running at a negative or a positive, I'm on the finance committee for this group, and they have turned the corner and are projecting positive outcomes for the next few years.
I think the great thing, when you start to look at it is, even though it's coming down, I mean, their enrollment is almost doubled in the past 2 years or so. I mean, it's almost 200.
That's what triggered the concern. The revenues are down, services are up, but we don't see costs.
that's because this was the problem, right?
Yeah.
This is why the people who were running this before all got fired. I mean, they were in the paper, indicted,
I get
criminal.
it, I get it. But even in the annual report, I would hope to have seen something about our cost structures are different, and,
Well, I would just say, in their defense, this is literally an entire new management team,
Okay,
right?
okay.
From the director on down. And I think they've not tried to dwell on that at all, right? I mean, it is what it is, and they haven't used it as a justification or excuse for anything that they're doing. They started 2 years ago. They're in their third year.
Okay.
They
Moving on.
assumed a blank piece of paper. We're moving on.
Got it.
Here's the number, but we're not going to say anything about it. We're just moving ahead.
Okay.
So that would be my take on it.
Good.
All right, any other questions?
And thank you for serving in that role.
Well, it's been very interesting for me because to see, this has just now become a very high-quality organization. So it has given me a lot of confidence that we're using a good organization for this purpose. And it's certainly, I would have no hesitation to send students to Crest.
Great.
So.
I think the exciting thing, when I looked over the report, and it was just the depth of their programs. And
Yeah.
I mean,
That's great.
you almost couldn't believe it. I mean, it was just fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, moving on, we have the first reading of the proposed private high school. Dr. Hutchinson.
Sure. I had said I was going to be able to meet with the leaders of this school, which I did. We reviewed what program they were presenting. They made some changes, and this is what you see based on the final product. The purpose of doing this, by the way, is the role of the school committee in this process is to simply say, as presented, is this program of studies comparable to what any high school should have to provide a diploma for the state? All right? So based on that, I've also had Dr. Scazzarella review this from the high school perspective, and it is. You only have to, the law is odd. You only have to approve that this curriculum meets the standards as far as coverage of courses, and it does, all right? You are not approving the school itself. You are not approving where it's located. Doesn't matter where it may be located. If they want to locate a school in in North Andover, they have to get this approved. Doesn't guarantee that it'll open in North Andover, it does, all right? The leaders of the school would be very welcome to come and speak with you. But my recommendation would be, based on the conversations I've had with them, the meeting I had with them, and the product that they produced, this meets the guidelines, the state, for program of studies.
So
And it's as simple as that.
So when would they be looking to open? September?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter.
I didn't know if, like, we had to vote and they had, I'm
Okay,
making it up, a
planning board
year or an
piece.
18-month
No,
period. and-
based on my knowledge, they may never open.
Okay.
I'm not saying they may never open, but it doesn't matter. All you have to do is they presented this
Okay.
and met the approval.
So whose approval? Is
The
it,
school committee approval, by law, the school committee has to vote to simply say, does this meet the program of studies requirements for obtaining a high school diploma?
and the school committee votes that?
That's the law. That's the only, after that, the school committee has nothing to do with it.
And they can completely change their curriculum after that.
They could, but then there's
that-
actually no process in place to say, hey, you changed all your curriculum.
Right. And this is a once,
One
And
time,
done
once and done.
process.
It's same like St. Michael's had,
Michael's.
St. Mike's had to do it at some point in time. Yeah.
So St. Michael's had to come to the school committee, whatever that was.
Yeah.
Assuming this-
Any high school, any private high school that is projecting to operate or has been operating in the city at some point in time had to have come to the school committee for that approval,
and they can take students from anywhere.
anywhere they want.
But because
Sure.
they potentially can be located in
Because
North
they're
Andover,
located,
we have to
it's
approve
a strange
Yeah.
piece of
it. Okay.
regulation, but, and the only thing the school committee ever has to do with it, a one-time approval of the program as presented. That's
Now,
it.
I guess my question would be, Dr. Anderson, why does the state think we, the school committee, are knowledgeable enough
Well,
to say, yeah, this, I mean, educators, yes, us,
But at the
more
same
maybe,
point in
but-
time, that's why we present the program of studies at the high school every year
Yeah.
to the
Yeah,
school
yeah.
committee. It's more of information, and you're based on, that's why I sat down with them, went over, gave them feedback on their original. They went back and did significant changes. I sat down with Dr. Scazzarella, she went over this as well. She's the one most knowledgeable with the high school program. And,
Okay, so it seems like we're relying upon you
Yeah,
as
sure,
our experts
yeah,
to say,
yeah.
yep, this meets the requirements, and then we concur in
Yeah.
your evaluation. Is that probably right?
yeah.
So this is just the curricular requirements, not the time on teaching requirements or any other
Just
components.
curriculum requirements.
Okay, and I think the way this is presented, they have, aspirational goals for
Yes,
curriculum
yes, yes.
components.
Yeah.
But I mean, I didn't see anything that jumped out at me in essence. By the way, I would love to have, community participation, at least hearing from the proposed school leadership to, come and have a dialogue about this is, they're excited or they're not excited and what they look forward to. I would also wonder if this is an opportunity for our students, either to have some of that cultural engagement, or is there an opportunity, or will there be a request to participate in some of the services we provide as part of the community of education?
It's a private school,
So, no band, no athletics,
private school.
it's paper
So this
use if it is
This is like
requested?
Central Catholic or something, right? Did they operate
Absolutely.
on whatever schedule they want? There's
Yep.
no 180 days for them.
Yep.
They do whatever they want, right? So while it's structured...
It's just about
structurally-
their program.
Okay, but my point would be, if I say, English, 20 credits, but they're, they only go 150 days because they're a private school. That's, 5 credits is a lot different than our 5 credits. I'm just saying,
But that's not what we have to.
I understand.
That's not what you have to
I understand. I understand.
By the way, I feel they've done an excellent job,
Okay.
especially in the revisions. They really took it to heart.
Yeah, it seems much
They're
better
a
than it
wonderful
seemed
job.
last time, yeah.
I love discussing the mission with them, but that's not something you're approving, you know?
Right, yeah.
And it was a wonderful group to meet with, so.
When they say qualified effective teachers, are they talking about licensed teachers?
They don't have to.
Interesting.
Yeah. And again, that has nothing to do with the program of studies, really, so. Yeah.
I'm perplexed.
That's the law. It's an odd law. You know,
It's
it's
one of
like,
those things, Brian.
you have proof that to say, if you did this, you'd be fine. And then, but after we approve this, we have nothing to do with it. That's simply the law. But you have nothing to do with private schools, other than initially
One step.
saying, okay, if you did this, and then we never,
Yeah.
and again, I hate to say that, because people's assumptions could be, oh, the people do this, and then they go off and do their own thing. You know, I'm not saying that. I'm saying private schools do a nice, good job. Based on their mission. And the fact is, are they providing types of credits, academic program, that's equivalent to what the state expects?
And it
And
appears
based
to
on
be
this,
that, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
So I know I'm being redundant, but I mean, Brooks would have done this at some point
Yep.
as well.
Yes.
And just,
1922 in June.
You were there.
Yeah.
Yes.
how did I know you would know the?
Yeah. He
Thank
just
you,
made
Mr.
that up.
Gilligan.
He's a history faker.
And we have, currently we have no, there's nothing that we have with Brooks in terms of anything that they do, with their
Nothing.
curriculum
rent
or
their
number of
ice.
days.
Yeah.
We get to rent their ice, and we get to sled on their fields.
That's
and-
Yeah.
right. Feed the geese. Okay, so,
But if you'd like, I mean, they'd be most willing to come and just simply introduce themselves.
yeah, I mean, that would, I think, be interesting.
Just for fun at some point. It'd be nice to have him come and just.
We'll invite them for next
Yeah,
meeting.
so this is,
Go ahead.
this is like me, you telling a brain surgeon, yeah, you're doing brain surgery, right? It's like, I have no, other than someone else knowing brain surgery, saying, I looked over it, yeah, he knows how to do brain surgery. It's more of a ceremonial event than anything else, so therefore, it would be nice to have
Yeah. After the
participation in the
ceremony.
ceremony.
Right.
In the end, don't forget, as far as private school is concerned, in the end, is the parents satisfied or not with the experience their students have?
Fair.
So,
It really has to tie with Chapter 76 of Mass General Laws and compulsory age of going to school in that age group upon a little check on it. So it appears it's just that one-time thing, and it's
Okay, well,
through.
So it may be in our best interest to just see if they're able to come next meeting, because it would be second reading. and
we
would vote on
told
it
them
and-
that they're most welcome. We have already told them they're most welcome to come next meeting.
Okay, great. And again, more ceremonial than anything.
okay,
Yeah.
But these things don't happen that often. I mean, I assume that we have no legal or regulatory aspect other than the vote.
Nope,
No, okay, no
That's it.
liability. All right,
Nope.
fine.
And there's,
none.
Okay,
they may never even open.
so
Correct.
it is
Yeah.
on record. Fine.
All right. Moving on, so discussion of school committee attendance area policies, JC, JCA, and JEC. So we kind of brought these all up together because they really all have to deal with kind of where students go to school, and I kind of didn't feel like bringing one up without at least talking about the rest of them would be in our best interest in case it was a question of, well, what about this scenario? So they're all kind of here. It's really just a discussion at this point. It's, there's no first reading. I knew that Mr. Teresi was not going to be here, so I didn't want to put first reading in for this as well. So policy JC is as it exists today, right now. I think it's JCA, which I may have just said incorrectly, but so Dr. Hutchinson did some redlining with some of the things that are no longer really kind of current in the world, and I have been looking at kind of how do we deal with students, or families, I should say, where they have students in multiple different schools, and we heard from Ms. McKay earlier today, and so I kind of just drafted number 3 that's kind of out there as well. So that's kind of why this is here, and that's kind of where this is at this point. The last policy is JEC, and that really kind of has to do with how we are in terms of open enrollment and assignment and movement of students kind of within the district. So again, they're all brought up kind of with each other in mind, but really the middle one, I'm going to say it wrong again, JCA is the only one that has potential for changes in it right now.
My only, in this particular, JCA, the only question I would have is single word, item number 1, new item number 1, child or schools. The implication in that is that the best interest of the child could be waived for the good of the school. It's in the child's interest unless it's in our best interest to somehow do something we want for the school. Just that one word in this entire thing. But it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, and then, the other feedback, I'm sorry, go ahead, comment.
I guess my thought on that would be, and correct me if I'm wrong in my interpretation of this, Dr. Hutchinson, that if there was a program that was offered at another school, and at some point during the school year, that program was better suited, that's why the movement would occur.
Or, for instance, sometimes we've moved programs from a school to another school.
Right.
That would be an
okay.
interpretation.
Okay.
So therefore, the students now that are in that program are now moving to this other school. You could make an argument it's not in the best interest of the students. And you could make an argument, but it's in the best interest of the school because the school doesn't have the capacity to absorb that size of a program.
You're not granting
That's
special permission.
though.
That's just, the
that's
program's
Right.
moving.
No,
so-
but,
programming.
well, it's true. That's true.
I was gonna say,
I think that's the issue of
Special
special
permission
permission.
That's more of someone requesting to move,
This
right?
recommends, and with all the power we have, with all our might, we try our best to get kids in the same school with their family.
Right.
Well,
And
then our policy
unfortunately,
should
what-
say that.
What?
Our policy should say that.
Yeah.
It doesn't yet.
And what happens sometimes is typically not the other grades, it's typically you have someone in a special program and the school's kindergarten fills up, you'd have to displace someone from the neighborhood,
That's the other policy.
That's
Yeah.
the other policy.
So, I need to read through this and become a little
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
familiar, but I think I see what you're doing with regards to the best interests of students. But I think the preamble is exactly as Mr. Gilligan had said. It is our intention, right, it's our guidance that families are together. And obviously, when programming and services don't allow that, the superintendent has to make special situational considerations.
But couldn't this also be if, let's just say a family lived in one elementary district but wanted the child to go to another elementary school? They could request that, right?
That's just not a neighborhood
That's number
request.
2.
Right, but I'm
Well,
saying that this policy isn't just about keeping families together, it's also about
but-
if someone
Right,
chooses.
right.
No, I agree, but it gives the superintendent special permissions, but I think the overarching guidance to how we handle these cases, I think needs to be explicitly stated.
Or our goal.
Yeah, our goal,
Yeah.
our goal. And it's our intention, right, to keep families together in schools, as services are provided, as best services can be.
And that was the
provided.
intent of
Right.
adding this piece.
Yep.
We redlined some
Right,
areas
right.
simply because it's not
Didn't
applicable.
make sense anymore. Right.
Yeah, got it.
But it sounds like, Mr. Gross, you're suggesting that literally there should be 1 or 2 sentences at the very beginning of this, which
Yeah.
states,
Yeah.
Simply,
In the preamble,
the
generally
goal of
students-
the North Andover School Committee is to keep families together, right? The goal.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we always achieve the goal, but
But I
that's
think
our-
you're changing the intent of this.
I understand, and that's a special thing to talk about, because if one student can only take advantage of services at a school, then, and there are 3 other students that need to either go to that school now, or now because you have a deficit of a service where the other students are, that's the issue that we're dealing with. And the guidance doesn't provide any insights to the superintendent on how to deal with that situation, because he can't magically, or she can't magically make a program appear where it doesn't exist, and, displacing 2 students in an existing neighborhood school to another school because one of the students are there. I understand the logistics may be beneficial to the family, but it may not be possible. So,
Right. No, I'm saying there's 2 different things here,
Yeah,
that's all.
yeah.
One is about keeping families together if one child has to go to a different school than their neighborhood school. and to keep the family together. But we're also talking about, I think this also talks about if any of us wanted to say, well, I want my third grader to go to one of the different elementary schools in their space, I could request that.
Yeah, that's doable.
Right. But I'm saying if we change the preamble, then do we have another policy?
You're almost negating what your second one was. Right.
No, I don't think so. Special permissions will be granted if the family requests otherwise. Right? That's what 2 says. It is our goal to do this, but we may grant special permission under 2, if the child chooses or if the family chooses to be at another school.
But that has nothing to do with keeping families together.
I'm saying it's two is
they're two different things.
2 has a very specific thing, and it's never, 2's hardly ever an issue because they're in, they're in the numbers.
Right, but I'm saying if we change the very beginning to talk about keeping families together, it
Correct.
makes
Yeah.
2 does
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
fit in.
Right.
It's more about part of 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which it pretty much already says it. You recommend that students of the same families be enrolled within the same schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me.
I mean, I wanted to start the conversation, you know, I mean,
It's good.
Nice job, Ian.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good.
I mean, I know of a family that had 3
families.
children, elementary, and 3 different schools, and the exact same scenario. And it was related to programs that were offered, but their third child did not need to attend programs, but the other 2 schools were locked, basically locked. And so it required them to go to Atkinson, I believe.
And that's, just to make sure that I'm clear on this, if students need a special program, if multiple students in a family need different special programs and they're offered at different schools, that's just,
There's almost nothing you can do, but in this case, it was, okay, we had a child, or the third child,
yes, we didn't need any
who
of them.
didn't need any of them, and
get it.
at least to get them with one of their siblings,
I
as
get that.
opposed
I get
to
that.
3
Because
separate
those
places.
kindergartens are full.
It seemed like, didn't we have
But who
a
gets the
family that
priority on
came
that seat, right? So there's
last
24
year
seats in the chair,
who had some
in the class.
special
Goes
needs?
back to what I mentioned before.
No?
It's- You try your hardest to get those people in, but at some point you'd have to consider, I think the heart of the policy, the elephant in the room is, would you have to take someone out that's registered from the neighborhood versus a kid who's not from that neighborhood but has a sibling there because of special needs?
Yeah,
And this doesn't say that. There's no guarantee here.
There's no guarantee,
There isn't a guarantee, but
But-
that.
but that's always been our intent. I think
Yeah.
this spells it out a little bit.
I think, and that's exactly it,
We've
that it
always
spells it
operated
out,
that
and
way.
now a parent can really kind of come in armed with JCA and say, this is really the goal, and this is what we need.
But the situations that we've had presented to us are terrible situations, right? I've got to pick up 3 kids at the same time at 3 different schools. I can't do that. But now, in order to accommodate, make that a little bit better, we have to impact another student or another student's family to make room somewhere else.
But that's
So-
not what this is saying.
That's
No,
not what
I understand that, but the policy, right, would require the question is, how far does the superintendent go to accommodate a request of that nature? If there's no capacity, we're sorry. Or do we now have to reach out and see if there are any volunteers to make a hole in an environment where we can accommodate a family?
But again, it's at the superintendent's discretion. I mean, there's no guarantee.
No, I understand that, but what's our...
So I think this policy might push the superintendent to be a little more aggressive to ask for volunteers, that type of thing.
Yeah, because it's a special circumstance.
not a bad
If someone has to go to a specialized program, if you're in one of the special education programs within the district, that's a little, that's different than just having 2 different kids in a school that maybe,
Sure.
maybe greater needs on the family or demands placed on the family.
Yeah, no, if that's your read of the policy change, then it sounds reasonable. I'm not sure I got that same read, but
Okay.
let's think about it.
So what I would encourage members of the committee to do is, if there's corrections or updates, let's get them to Bev. And we will put this in for first reading on the 5th.
Second reading?
It's just
No,
This is just discussion.
This is just
Got it.
discussion.
Thank you.
So my other quick question is and we don't necessarily have to do it today, but I will only put in JCA for revision. I don't feel like anybody has said anything regarding JC or JEC. JEC.
Right.
But I just wanted, for purpose of discussion, to have everything kind of available.
And JCA does refer to the other two? No, they don't.
Say it
All
again.
right, that's fine, that's fine.
So, just so I understand, JC is basically the bus districts, right? Is that a way of saying that? If I looked at the bus map, that would be JC, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that would
All
be
the lines
a
around it.
true redistricting,
Yeah.
you know, we're moving, let's say, Royal Crest from School 1 to, you know,
So
however we're
that's
kind
JC,
of...
that defines the areas in which students go to whatever school.
Correct.
Elementary school.
Okay.
And then JCE is load balancing.
Exactly.
If you will.
Yes.
Engineer,
Okay.
yeah, whatever.
Engineering term.
Technical guy, you nerd, geek guy.
Then the JCA is the fine tuning.
Yeah. No, it's the exception policy to all of the above, right?
Got it.
I don't want to go in this district. You know, historically, this is called a school district, right? It is not. The bus areas are the districts in our school. This is a school system, right? In the old days, we had district schools because everybody walked to school. The school had to be within walking distance, right? Just saying,
Yeah.
historically. Okay. Sounds good. No, this is all good. This is all good. Okay.
All right. The next thing that we have on the agenda is discussion of school committee policy FF. I think it's just FF. It's FF and FFA. I think it's just the two. And this has to do with the naming of facilities and memorials regarding students or faculty members who have passed. And there's a feeling of kind of wanting to name something after that student. So there was nothing that I wanted to put out in terms of policy updates or changes. A little of this was to start a conversation about why we have the policy and why, how we kind of structure that and how it's been done in the past. This comes up every couple of years in terms of just kind of things that happen within our community, and I just wanted to have a little bit of conversation about this. The most kind of obvious thing that I think happened probably, I'm thinking about 10 years ago, was the opening of the Early Childhood Center.
Correct. Well, 2009.
2009?
6 years.
It was only 6?
Yeah.
Seems like forever, right?
It seems like a long, all right.
Talking about it for
When-
10,
when
but-
Jim
That
showed
that
up,
may have been it.
started at the same time he showed up. Huh?
And I know that there was a lot of conversation at that point, I wasn't on the committee then, regarding, you know, whether or not we would name it after somebody, whether or not there would be a true kind of name. You know, we obviously have Albert E. Thompson, you know, the sergeant, you know, we have some pretty significant names in town of members who have given long service to North Andover. And so just wanted to broach this.
Yeah, good point. I think the only school that's been named in the last 50 or 60 years was Sargent, Annie L. Sargent School. And as you know, the history of that, she worked in the school system for 50 years, served in almost every capacity, and was, you know, the pillar of the district for decades.
Half a century.
So that was kind of a no-brainer. That was not a hard decision to make for that particular thing. And when we got to the opening of the Early Childhood Center, it seemed that by following the precedents of both the middle school and the high school, who are not named, right, it would preclude a lengthy discussion on complicated issues that we didn't want to have at that time. just saying. And it's worked out fine as far as I'm concerned. I don't think we lost anything in translation. The Bradstreet School falls in the sort of the previous tradition, which was like Kittredge. Kittredge was named not after an educator, but after a town founder, right?
Right.
And I think Bradstreet is the same, right? It's more of a historical name.
Yes.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong. you know.
Bradstreet.
Yeah, so,
Right.
Not Ann as most.
so there was not any necessarily strong reason to transfer the name to the new school, right? Because it didn't quite meet the criteria that we've been using subsequent to that, which is educators and people who've made contributions.
Stan, were you on the committee when they named the stadium? I think that was probably the most recent.
I was not. But I mean,
The stadium at the high school was named.
Right.
I just don't know what the process
But the
was.
same, this policy was the one that was, as I understood it, governed that. You know, somebody who made a lengthy contribution to the system, the school system.
Yeah.
And that's how that got the football field and the stadium, right? So, just saying. So, so far, these policies have stood us in good stead, you know, nothing bad seems to have happened, so. But it's probably worth a discussion if we want to have one.
Okay. So one of the things that kind of isn't here, and I don't necessarily, you know, it may behoove us to just, and I don't even know how far back these may go, but, you know, what were they before? Were they changed? And I'm just trying to figure out, were these policies changed, you know, 20 years ago? Were they, you know, how long have they really kind of been in effect? And whether or not,
That's a good question.
I would be curious to see a little bit of the historical and see if there was something that kind of changed it, you know, let's say 20, 25 years ago where, you know, we were not going to name something.
Well, yeah, I guess what I would say is, let's see, Sergeant, help me out here, Frank. Sergeant came online, what, in 95?
94.
94. So let's say we at least go back to that,
Okay.
okay, and try to figure out how that decision was made, and what the process was, and what policy was used at that time. So that's 20 years ago, right?
Right.
Let me ask why. Bluntly, but why? As I said, I think the policy has served us well, and at this point, I don't see a major inflow of need to be naming buildings right now.
No, we don't have any new schools on
We're not going to put any new schools, unfortunately, for a while, or, you know, maybe a couple of portables, but we don't name those either.
Yeah, right. We didn't name the Kittredge.
So I think the history of how we got here is less relevant than is the way it's presented now. Is a policy as presented here still relevant to how the board perceives its responsibility to the community?
For new facilities.
For new
The
facilities.
policy is specific to
Yes,
new facilities,
yes.
that policy.
And I, sort of picking up on your point, Mr. Gross, I also think that this policy on memorials, right, which is not facilities, but a different issue, also seems to me to be appropriate for what we have typically been doing, which is, you know, I'm all for memorials, right, if we want to do that, right? So I think this policy also seems to be still very appropriate. I'm okay with that, too. So the point being, you know, not broken, why fix?
Yeah, and I would agree.
But we can still have a discussion, right?
Okay.
We can still have a discussion.
So, I mean, one of the things, go ahead, Ms. Gillian.
I was just wondering, because I was just looking it over, it's the first time I've seen it. Is there a difference up there between, like, facilities like the football stadium that was named versus schools? No. It just says schools up there.
New facility.
New facility, okay.
Well, I was just going to say, in this,
Reference
it
to
seems
school.
to emphasize school,
Yeah.
but then in one case, it uses the word facilities instead of school. But in all of the
Well,
cases,
the title says facilities.
and naming new
Therefore,
facilities.
that might
but
be good
right away, it
to-
says naming a school is an important matter.
Right.
And then all references are to schools except for that one.
Yeah, that's a valid point. So maybe it's naming a school or facilities of a school.
Yeah, I was just thinking 2004 wasn't that far along
Yeah.
with the stadium. I'm not sure when it was named. It was 4 or 5. I don't know.
But I guess, you know, to clarify the you know, the objective, I think is reasonable, but I guess the question for this board is there a belief that that objective is needing to be changed?
Right. And unless, I know of no particular reason why, for example, this policy would need to be changed, in my opinion, based on anything that's in front of us now.
Other than to clarify, as Mr. Miller pointed out, a facility versus a school, and a facility being part of a school.
Right. Right.
Okay. So let's look into that a little bit. I know that
Okay.
there's been, some communication lately, regarding naming. And so wanted to kind of, again, just
Okay.
bring that up for some discussion to get some of the historical.
Yep.
But let's look into a little bit of Walsh Stadium and how that kind of came to be.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay.
All right?
Good.
Anything else?
I'm good.
All right. Public comment. We still have public, so,
Yeah. Yes.
all right. Any public comment from the committee?
Yeah, I do. I want to wish the North Andover and Haverhill girls varsity hockey team good luck Saturday night. They're playing at Haverhill High School at 6 p.m., so good luck to them. And are we still doing Read Across America Week next week?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so have a wonderful Read Across America Week next week.
Mr. Limpert?
I'm good.
Just briefly, I returned after a few weeks abroad, and I just wanted to just thank the town facilities for keeping the power on, keeping traffic flowing, widening the streets, and doing an absolute yeoman's job on keeping ahead of Mother Nature. And also congratulations to our leadership for keeping school on as safely and as often as possible in the last 2 weeks of the deluge. So just want to put out that shout out.
All right. I don't
May I
have,
do a public apology?
you can?
With all this snow, I typically communicate with the foreman in charge. And early the other morning, when it was snowing 3 inches in Gloucester, and I did check, I called John Lavin, and he wasn't the one in charge that day, and I woke him up very early in the morning, so I apologized to him. He was his usual congenial self when I
Even though you
spoke with him, even though I woke him up. I just wanted to give a public, because he has been fantastic, because he's been on duty all the other storms, mostly, and he's been totally responsive.
Yeah.
It's been interesting for me because I regularly drive into and out of Andover, as you probably all do, and it seems like
It's amazing.
We've done so much. Our DPW
Great.
contractors have done so much better than Andover. I mean, they still got stuff over there.
River Road's a main throughway, and it's almost a half lane.
It's awful.
Some
I
of
mean,
them-
they haven't, sidewalks, they've done terrible
What are
jobs.
those?
You know.
So I just want to say I've heard from a number of people in the community that they appreciate the calls the night before announcing that school is not.
Yeah, no, no,
Mostly appreciated was the hour before the Super Bowl, of course.
Yes, very much.
Well, no, I would applaud you, Superintendent Atchison, on the communication, because I think it's been going great. I mean, getting it out promptly and keeping people posted. We delayed, no, I think we'll cancel, no, I think we're good, right?
Right.
But nonetheless, letting people know in time so they can still adjust. So I think that you've been doing a great job.
Those text messages go all the way to India, just.
Yeah, yeah.
$12.99 a minute, so. All right. Anything else?
From you, you're all set?
I'm all
I
set.
move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting is adjourned.